Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our 10th session now for in the De Gruyter Brill's webinar series, Challenging the Status Quo, Taking Libraries into the Future. Thank you. And today it's all about open access. Open access is continuing to expand rapidly worldwide, but with its growth come challenges. Ensuring quality, scaling up, and maintaining sustainability and financial and political pressures. So how do we keep moving forward? Today, we're joined by two leading voices in the open access community, Neil Stern from OAPEN Foundation and the Directory of Open Access Books, and Dominic Mitchell from the Directory of Open Access Journals, the Open Access Scholarly Publishing Association, and Think, Check, Submit. Thank you both for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today. So without further ado, I will move over to our moderator team. Here are Niels and Dominic again, but you will see them in a minute. And our moderator team, Linda Bennett and Annika Bennett from Goldleaf. Thank you, both of you. And your video and audio is, as always, turned off, but please type your questions into the question box or your ideas, anything you would like to talk about, and the panelists will endeavor to speak about it and answer your questions. After the webinar, I will work on the recording and I will send you all the slide deck, recording, and further information about this and upcoming events. So for now, I hope you enjoy the webinar, and over to you, Linda.
Thank you. I'll just introduce everyone to Annika before she switches her camera off. Annika will be there in the background making sure the technology works, but she will also be fielding and grouping the questions. So she will help me moderate the questions after the two presentations. And most of the questions will be taken after both presentations. So I may just take one question after the first presentation. So welcome everybody, and thank you for attending, and thank you to those of you who attend these webinars regularly. As Andrea said, it is the 10th. The first one was in March 2023, and every year one of these quarterly webinars is on open access. And this year we chose the topic of maintaining the momentum because in conversations with our colleagues at De Gruyter and work that Annika and I have done as well, we got the feeling that the momentum was slowing a bit because of geopolitical factors, because librarians are even more squeezed for money and their first priority is serving their patrons as well as they can, and because the role of librarians themselves is changing as well and they have far more things to do than they used to have. So we feel this is a really important webinar to explore what's going on and what can be done to speed up the momentum again, and we have probably the most two distinguished speakers in the world to carry this forward. I would particularly like to welcome Niels because those of you who have attended them before may remember that Niels spoke at our very first webinar, which was called Free the Book, and it was a title that Niels himself chose. And it was about making more books available through open access. So welcome back, Niels. And Dominic, thank you very much for attending as well, for speaking as well, I should say. We will introduce you properly later, but together you have an encyclopedic knowledge of what's going on in open access at the moment. And so we are very privileged to be listening to you. So Niels, Andrea's already introduced you. I know that you began working in scholarly publishing more than 20 years ago, and that you've also worked on policy making for open access in Denmark. And we may come back to that later because, of course, Denmark doesn't have quite the same approach to open access as everywhere else in Europe. But now, Niels, would you like to start your presentation, please? Thank you.
Yes. So thank you very much, Linda, for the kind words and the kind introduction, and thank you to Andrea, to De Gruyter Brill, for inviting me to do this talk today on open access and keep maintaining the momentum, as you say. I think this is a very appropriate time in history to talk to these challenges as well that we see. So I'm very pleased to get this opportunity. To get started, I'll just a few words about the organization I represent, the OAPEN Foundation. So we are a small, not-for-profit Dutch foundation. So by Dutch law, we cannot be sold or acquired. Our mission is to increase the discoverability of peer-reviewed open access books, but also to build trust in OA book publishing. We adhere, as an open infrastructure, we adhere to the principles of open scholarly infrastructure, POSI, and we provide three main services: the OAPEN Library, which was launched 15 years ago at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2010. And at the time, we were 6 university presses, and today we have books from over 400 presses from around the world. And we apply quality criteria. We evaluate publishers before they can join the OAPEN Library, and the same is true for DOAB, the Directory of Open Access Books, which was launched a few years after OAPEN Library, much inspired by DOAJ. And DOAB is an index, so it's only hosting metadata, whereas OAPEN is hosting the full text files. And so DOAB is more global. There are more titles indexed from over 650 publishers. And for the past 5 years, we've also coordinated and maintained the OA Books Toolkit, which is a public information resource containing around 50 articles, small articles around most topics relevant to OA book publishing. So with that, coming back to the topic of today, and you already mentioned, the challenges we face, political, financial, big societal challenges, and how this can threaten the progress of open access. And so how do we keep the momentum going, which is the topic of today. And I think this is the how question is very important. But I think equally important is, of course, the why question. So why should we keep the momentum going? And I think, especially in times of big challenges, this is an important question. Why open access? Why open science is probably more important than ever. So this is what I will focus on today. And I will do this by looking at sort of a high level perspective and then also a very more concrete local perspective. But first, just to confirm the assumption that there has been indeed a momentum, looking at the OAPEN library and sort of the evolution of the library over time. And just to give you a few numbers, over the past 5 years, this is the growth of the library in terms of books that we have added. So you can see from 2020 till last year, it has grown significantly. Also, the number of new publishers joining, we keep getting new publishers on board, and equally the diversity of languages, so really supporting bibliodiversity. OAPEN was a European initiative, but has become a global open infrastructure. And the distribution of licenses within the OAPEN library is also quite sort of diverse. Usage-wise, it's really global. It's used across the globe, and usage has grown year on year. Especially during COVID, we saw a steep increase in usage, but it keeps growing, and we see around almost 2 million counter-conforming downloads per month. Right, but there are these big challenges, and I've been quite inspired by this book that was published last year, written by Anne Applebaum, where she is basically showing how dictators of our time sort of support each other in a kind of network setting, which he calls Autocracy Inc. So these are um, leaders, dictators of countries that definitely do not support democracy, and really, as she writes, their primary goal is to stay in power, and to do so, they're willing to destabilize their neighbors, they're willing to destroy the lives of ordinary peoples, and so on. So these challenges are real, they are very real, and they put pressure on our democracies. So I think it's um, appropriate today to talk about how the relationship is between open access and democracy. And so, as I said, this is how I will begin a kind of high level approach to why I think it's important to keep the momentum going for open access. And then I will later on turn to the more local concrete levels as well. But also talking about democracy, because actually today it's the Constitution Day in Denmark. I'm Danish and based in Denmark, although OAPEN is based in the Netherlands. And we've had our constitution since 1849. So today is a celebration day of a democracy, of course, that has developed over time and has become a very strong one. I would say in Denmark, and there is a history to this, which is not only in Denmark but in fact in the Nordic countries, that we see strong democratic traditions, strong welfare states, very low levels of corruption, high level of happiness, and also importantly high level of social trust. And this report is investigating why there are these high levels of social trust in the Nordic countries. Social trust meaning that you trust in people you don't know, and also in institutions. And so, as the quote here says, that membership of an association and the state's open attitude help to create the foundations for diffusion of power. In turn, this helped to increase trust in institutions, but also the more general social trust in society. So really emphasizing the importance of citizen engagement, especially through small associations. In Denmark, as in the other Nordic countries, we have thousands of small associations on any given topic, and each association has its own bylaws with, based on democratic principles. And when you're an association, you also get public funding. So there's a very, very widespread engagement at the citizen level that is feeding the democracy of our country. And I think this is really important because democracy, of course, is not given by nature. It's something you really have to work for every day. And these are numbers from 2014. You can see from this report in 2022, the Atlas of European Values, that still the Nordic countries in the more light red, this shows that the level of social trust is high. But as this report also highlights, that the democratization process shows signs of stagnation or even rollback. So this sort of points back to an Applebaum and Autocracy Inc., that there is this strong pressure on democracy from different type of state, different ways of infiltrate with misinformation on social media, to infiltrating election campaigns, and even to violent invasion, like we see Russia invading Ukraine. So there's a lot of pressure on democracy, and this led me to also share with you this very newly published article by Pierre Mounier, where he is addressing actually the fact that, or the paradox that, while we do have access to enormous amounts of information via the internet, there is that we're living in a period, as he says, marked by a rapid deterioration of the public debate. And this is a very important problem, which he thinks, and he's addressing that it relates to the fact that the public knowledge infrastructure is needs more coordination, it needs more investment, and we need to rebuild it, at the intersection of individuals, institutions, and these professions, as he writes. And the to extract from this article, which I would very much also recommend to read, is that citizen engagement is really the cornerstone of rebuilding this public knowledge infrastructure as a social fabric that will also safeguard democracy. And so you see the relation also to what I presented as the background for the Nordic countries, development of social trust and democracy, citizen engagement, as he says, citizen science, citizen journalism, active pedagogy, popular education, and so on, are really needed to restore this public knowledge infrastructure. And as part of that public knowledge infrastructure is also access and open access to quality scholarly content. It can be in the form of books, journal articles, data, and so on. But this is a way of empowering this citizen engagement. So really important. And this is, of course, for us, our mission is to make sure that we help distribute and curate quality scholarly content in the form of books. And this is true both for OAPEN and for the directory of open access books. We put a lot of effort into the evaluation process of publishers when they want to be part of DOAB. And we have good conversations with our friends at DOAJ about how to go about this. And so we have a small evaluation team, and we have procedures for the evaluation of publishers. And on our website, we have our requirements listed so that any publisher can visit them and can look at them before they apply. And I think it's also important to emphasize that as we are global, there are different traditions around the world. We are fully supporting bibliodiversity. So we try really to understand how can we best support good scholarly work published as books. And we're not trying to exclude people, but we're trying to be inclusive, but also to filter out any questionable publishing activities. So that's why the evaluation has to be thorough. And also sometimes we have to help newcomers so that they can be more transparent and clearer about how they publish good scholarly works. And we can then help them become more discoverable through DOAB. We also support strongly, of course, the Think Check Submit checklists. I'm part of the committee for Think Check Submit, where Dom is the chair, and this is a very important checklist for authors to really go through a number of important things to consider before submitting their manuscripts to either a journal or a book publisher. I think it's also good for example, book publishers to check what is important to showcase to potential authors. And we've just actually yesterday and the day before, we had 2 guest posts on Scholarly Kitchen explaining how DOAB works, our requirements, and how we build trust also by collaborating with other platforms around in the world, like Open Edition, like JSTOR, like Cielo, and others across the globe. So you can have a read. It was published yesterday and the day before. So now for the last part of my presentation, I'll go a bit into the more sort of, let's say, local benefits for libraries, publishers, and funders. And by libraries, I also mean readers, and by publishers, also authors. Local benefits of keeping up the momentum for open access, particularly to books. So basically what we do is to help publishers make their books more discoverable, more findable, more accessible. And this is good news, of course, for publishers and for authors, but also for libraries, because we provide libraries with these collections of peer-reviewed books ready to put on their shelves, basically. So we have open metadata, we have an open API, or if you use Exlibris or EBSCO or OCLC as a knowledge base, you can activate these collections and get them straight into your discovery system as a library. So, and we also work with research funders in a number of European countries, including UK, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, and the Netherlands, where we collect books funded by the national research funders in those countries, including also the European Commission and Wellcome. And then I found this newsletter by accident from an North American university library, which I was really happy about because it emphasizes a point I've often made, that actually open access books are much better for perpetual access to content than licensed content. So I think in the whole sort of conversation around Clarivate and perpetual access, I think it's really important to understand that when we have books in the OAPN library, each book gets a handle, and that handle is permanent. So it's a permanent identifier. The book may also have a DOI that returns back to where you can find the book, but it won't go away. So you can add your, as a library, as a faculty, you can add these open access books to reading lists, to syllabi, and they won't disappear all by a sudden. I think that's a very important point to make about the reliability and the perpetuality of open access books. And also we work with CERN. CERN is our backend. So we have OAPN and DOAB on DSpace repository software, which is hosted by CERN. And this, of course, gives us a lot of capacity and bandwidth. And we are very happy for this collaboration and this way to see how a big organization like CERN is really invested in open science and showing it through a number of partnerships, including this one. And I think this might also be why we were invited by Knowledge Commons to be part of a project proposal addressing this Trust in American Institutions Challenge, which was launched by the Lever for Change a couple of months ago. And we're very happy to, and hopefully this proposal will be successful. We don't know yet, but at least I think it shows that an open infrastructure for open access books can provide a lot of trust for for the sake of research and dissemination, and also long-term access of research books. We also provide usage statistics dashboards, so you can follow and see as a library, as a publisher, or as a funder how the books are doing from the OAPN library. And it's often been documented that books that are open access are downloaded and cited much more than books that are not open access. And then finally, just the two slides on how we engaged in community activities. As I mentioned, the Open Access Books Toolkit, where we have a very strong editorial advisory board consisting of experts from across all stakeholder groups, and they give input to new articles. Some of them write articles, and we have these short articles on all sorts of topics relating to open access book publishing. They're all CC BY, so they can be used, reused, translated, downloaded, and so on by anyone. We have also recently added new articles on policies and funding. So, for example, funding opportunities for open access book publishing, there are articles around that topic too. And I also want to mention the Open Access Books Network, which OAPN was co-founding and is co-coordinating, which has provided numerous events and discussions on all sorts of topics relating to OA book publishing. And it's free to join. It's open. You can join as much as you like and engage in discussions. Right. So with that, I come to my conclusion because we've seen, I think, that there is a strong case for open access supporting democracy. There's a strong case for actually open access providing benefits to publishers, to libraries, to funders, to readers and authors. And therefore, I think my conclusion would be that please help maintain this momentum. I think it is very important and more important than ever. So with that, thank you very much. and happy to take questions when we get to that stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. So we haven't got any questions yet, but we'll go straight on to Dominic, I think, because I'm sure we will get some questions. And I do have some questions myself, but I'd like to ask you both the same questions, if I may. So Dominic is the Deputy Director and Platform Manager at DOAJ. He's the Chair of the Board of Directors for the Open Access Scholarly Publishers Association, better known as OASPA, and the Chair of the Committee for Think. And he's also done many other things in the world of open access, which you can read about on the De Gruyter Brill website if you wish. But welcome, Dominic, and thank you for applying a practical perspective to what Niels has just been talking about.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the kind words, Linda, and thank you to De Gruyter for having me here today. And thanks to Niels for a fantastic presentation. It's a real honor to get to speak with Niels, and I'm delighted to say I'm not going to contradict anything that Niels said, so that's a good thing. So the title of my presentation is Maintaining the Momentum, and I think that we need to do that by reconnecting or connecting what I think has become a very fragmented landscape. I have a theory, and that I'm going to present that theory to you, and then I'm going to ask the question, is momentum challenged or has open access simply matured? And then I'd like to present a few ways that I think that DOAJ is helping to maintain that momentum and how that sort of relates back to my theory. And in the end, give some examples, specific examples of initiatives, projects, and partnerships that I think offer a path forwards. So here's my theory. It's not particularly earth-shattering, I don't think. Greater transparency and openness are the antidote to misinformation and distrust. Together, they lead to greater resilience and sustainability. Transparency and openness are the bridges between islands of global disparate actors that create one strong, interconnected, transparent, and diverse research ecosphere. Open access is a vital ingredient in that antidote. And I would actually even go as far as to say that organizations like DOAJ, DOAB, OAPEN, open infrastructures are the vital ingredients in that antidote. When I started creating this presentation, I put down this theory, and I thought, wow, is this really how I think that we can achieve momentum? And it is. And then I realized that it's not even my idea, because just a few weeks previously, the DOAJ team was lucky enough to have a presentation by Caroline Sutton, who is the CEO of STM, the International Association of Scientific, Technical and Medical Publishers. And STM every year puts out something called STM Trends. And this year, it's always looking forward 5 years. And this one is looking forward to 2029. And they sum up what the future trends are going to be in one illustration. And I think they've been doing this for more than 10 years at least. And you'll see that their future consists of a bridge building over the dangerous waters that have sharks and all sorts of perils. And there are different sort of groups of stakeholders coming together, represented by the different colored hard hats down here. And for them, it's about fortifying the foundations of trust in research. And I think that really complements, sort of my theory and how I think we can maintain momentum today. So I was at the OASPA conference in Lisbon last year. And at that conference, some key things became very clear. First of all, it became clear that we're only 50% of the way to achieving open access as the default mode of publishing. There's been fantastic momentum achieved by all different players, all different stakeholder groups, but the feeling was that we were only halfway there. How do we get the rest of the way? There have been failures along the way. Transformative journals, transformative agreements haven't transformed. And that's led to some cynicism in certain, in certain areas of scholarly publishing. Green open access is absolutely vital. It's been there since the beginning, but it's still too complicated for authors to engage with. How can we overcome that barrier? And I think something that is probably well known to most of us, and that is the APC-based open access, or gold open access as it's called these days, is creating these inequalities. But despite coming away with these sort of themes at the end, there was incredible hope in the room. There was incredible sense of the community coming back together and sort of reconnecting. But we're all aware, of course, of the challenges. And there are challenges in open access publishing and in scholarly publishing. But, I think importantly, it's about where we choose to invest our time and resources. Should we pause to invest all our resources, our money, into the horrors of open access publishing and scholarly publishing at large? And I don't think I need to read that list of these horrors. The reason that I have an image of a Victorian newspaper from 1896 is that the Victorian newspapers are renowned for sensationalism. That's how they sold newspapers. They sort of took a story and they exaggerated it. And sometimes in the experience that I've had at DOAJ, I do get the sense that these horrors of publishing, of open access publishing, are slightly exacerbated. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I'm thinking we could probably spend our time and resources in better ways. I think one thing that's particularly funny, if I may pause about this illustration, is that the title of this news article is that it's an alarming experience of fair bathers who are attacked by an octopus, but it happens to be the cutest looking octopus that I've ever seen. I thought that was quite appropriate. And then, of course, there's the Goliaths of academia. What do we do about career progression incentives, research assessment exercises, journal rankings, impact factors, publish or perish cultures? Should we again pause and invest our time and resources in trying to fight these things? There are extremely good organizations and initiatives that are doing this, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. But I think, again, as libraries, as publishers, we might want to probably turn our attention elsewhere. There are, of course, literally attacks on libraries these days, both here in Sweden, in the UK, and all over the US. Collections are being destroyed, removed, hidden, budgets are being cut. What do we do about that? How do we keep going in our day-to-day jobs when that's happening around us? Open access is over 20 years old. Are publishers tiring? Will they walk away? For those of you who follow open access and its developments, then the name Richard Poinder may be familiar to you. He's an open access observer, at least he was, and he's a journalist. And he very publicly walked away from open access, declaring that it had taken too long and it was a dead duck. But then I'm left wondering, how can you influence progress? How can you keep momentum going if you just walk away from the table? I'm very lucky to have just come back from the workshop on open citations that was in Bologna last week, and Catherine Skinner, who's the executive director of Invest in Open Infrastructures, IOI, gave a keynote speech there, and she told us that grant funders won't fund survival. They want to fund interesting, sexy, and exciting projects when the thing that open infrastructures need to do is just survive. So how do we tackle that as open infrastructures, if, as Neil said, open infrastructures are so vital to trust and democracy? And then just something that I picked from DOAJ on a very much more sort of local level, why is the percentage of fee-free journals in DOAJ going down? Is it because we're doing systematic updating of our journal records and that many journals have flipped to charging fees? Does this mean that APC-based publishing will become the default? That's certainly not the message that we're seeing here in Europe, with a huge emphasis on diamond open access publishing. But it's early days. We've just sort of found this figure, and we're going to be doing some investigating here at DOAJ. So yes, there are challenges and hurdles in the path to achieving open access as the default. But if we look out towards a more global community then another picture emerges. I think that's one that suggests that momentum isn't really challenged. It's just that open access has matured. As I said, it's been around for 20 years. And I'd like to show you a little bit of sort of facts to back that up from a very much DOAJ point of view. For those of you that are familiar with DOAJ, you will know that we are now indexing more journals than we have ever done before, and that we index more abstract metadata than we have ever done before. And journals keep applying to us. I did a quick piece of research in preparation for this talk, and I looked at all the applications from the top 12 publishers in DOAJ in the last 5 years. And you'll see some familiar names up here, and maybe a couple that aren't so familiar, a couple of large publishing institutions from Indonesia. The Elsevier line here is sort of skewing the detail. This is when they connected to our API in 2020, and so by 2021 they had fully automated the application process for all of their journals. If I remove that line, then you'll see that it shows a sort of clearer picture, and I wouldn't really say that from this chart alone it looks like momentum is dropping off. I think momentum is stable. And then just another view, this time a longer time period, from 2018 to 2024, we see that the total number of applications coming into DOAJ sort of peaked around 2021 and has remained fairly stable until we saw a slight drop off last year, although this year numbers are already picking back up again. So the open access landscape, certainly from a DOAJ point of view, isn't static at all, and we're still seeing a lot of movement, but on a much more global scale. Our usage is going up and up. We have an average of 1.6 million visitors per month, or 3 million page views. And of course, people are accessing research in new ways. This chart shows the referral traffic to DOAJ from ChatGPT alone. And you'll see that when ChatGPT sort of had, at some point, had ingested our metadata and people started being referred to DOAJ, interestingly, the highest referrals to from ChatGPT to DOAJ come from Indonesia. And Indonesia was responsible for this first sort of peak on pretty much on its own. So a lot of movement, a lot of things going on in the DOAJ world at least, and I think the charts that Niels showed also prove there's a lot of movement going on in the open access books world as well. But how does DOAJ maintain or even encourage that momentum and to keep that momentum up? Well, apologies for using this saying, which has become almost a cliche, but it does take a village to raise a child. And in DOAJ's case, we didn't get to where we are today on our own. We have hundreds of supporters, we have volunteers, we have ambassadors, we have open access enthusiasts who have been carrying us forward over the last 23 years. We are community owned and we are an open infrastructure. And this is really important to the global research community, particularly academic libraries and research centers. All the money that is that comes to DOAJ is given voluntarily, and that's from publishers, libraries, funders, and in some cases even individuals. 73% of the DOAJ support, in fact, comes from academic organizations. So if you are if you're listening to this and you're from one of the supporting organizations of DOAJ, thank you so much. We're also seeing a trend at DOAJ. We know that library budgets are being cut, but we are seeing a trend of libraries and universities switching funds from traditional subscription deals to fund open infrastructures instead. And I think it's a little bit of a sort of moving away, trying to not put all your eggs in one basket. And it's thanks to initiatives such as SCOS and the IOI InfraFinder that open infrastructures are really gaining attention and getting so much support. And I've left a couple of URLs here if you want to go and check out those two initiatives. So referring you back to my theory about how we maintain momentum through transparency and openness, This is how DOAJ puts that into practice. We remain committed to openness and transparency by adhering to POSI, like Niels said at the start of his presentation. And we also adhere to the principles of transparency and best practice, of which DOAJ is an author. We aim that no journal record in DOAJ will be older than 2 years. We're not there yet. We're working on it. We are starting to review our oldest records, and we are starting to automate some checks, but everything is done manually by our team of volunteers and managing editors. And importantly, we're committed to maintaining all our metadata services open to all. And this is really important because our metadata appears in all the major discovery services, all the aggregators, the search engines, the journal picker tools, and in AI, as we've seen. And it does that because we allow it to be openly available and in multiple formats. We waive the rights on our article metadata, and we're currently discussing waiving rights on our journal metadata too, which we currently license with a CC BY. And that means that we can really sort of keep the momentum of open access going by allowing journals and their articles to be displayed and shared and disseminated all over the internet. One of the important things that we do at DOAJ, and one of the projects that I really love, is our ambassador program. And we're committed to maintaining an active and vibrant ambassador and volunteer network. And we are committed to diversity and inclusion in our team. And I'm really proud to say that we're signatories of C4DISC, the campaign, which is an American-based campaign. And we're shortly going to be publishing a renewed statement of our commitment on our website. And here is a map showing where our ambassadors come from, and the emphasis on the southern hemisphere is, of course, by design. So, greater transparency and openness lead to greater resilience and sustainability. So, but here are some ideas that I think we can use to move us forwards. The Helsinki Initiative, for those of you who don't know it already, was launched in 2019. And in my opinion, it's one of the best initiatives to come out of scholarly publishing ever. And I don't say that lightly. I think it's criminally underused. I think it's criminally undercited. I think it needs to be talked about more, and it needs more signatories. So if you're inspired by my presentation, please head over to here and consider becoming a signatory. And I have no conflict of interest here. It was launched in 2019 to highlight the fact that multilingualism keeps locally relevant research alive and that we have to protect that. Its 3 principles were written in 2019, and they are still so relevant and actually scarily relevant to the world that we're in today. Research, so principle number 1, research is for the benefit of society, and by maximizing its accessibility and dissemination, we maximize the benefit of research. And we mustn't forget that. DOAJ makes all its metadata open for free, as does OAPEN and DOAB and many other open infrastructures. And we need to keep it that way. Protect national infrastructures for publishing locally relevant research. National infrastructures that publish locally relevant research must be protected. Make sure that book and journal publishers are safeguarded. And of course, those words ring so true today with the things that we're seeing coming out in the news. Promote language diversity, resist homogeneity, embrace the wonderful diversity of the entire global research ecosphere, resist the dominance of one language, one group, one point of view. Diversity is what is going to keep the momentum of open access going forward. Another way that we encourage, that we help the momentum go forward is by encouraging good practice in scholarly publishing. I think it's really important that we create and make open content from trustworthy sources, and that those sources themselves instill trust and that they highlight good practice. Use a global community in the way that we use our ambassador network to be review, update, correct as much as possible, and be open to corrections and reviews and other points of view coming in. One of the ways that we've done that at DOAJ with OASPA was to launch the Open Access Journals Toolkit. It has an independently selected editorial board, and it's available in 5 languages to maximize that accessibility of the content. It's proving to be an extremely useful resource, and I'm really proud that we've been able to launch this. It was very much based on the Open Access Books Toolkit that Niels showed you earlier. Finally, highlight the best practice. This is going back to that picture of that very, very cute octopus. Take the spotlight away from bad practice. This is my personal opinion. I think we spend too much time and energy and money on highlighting bad practices while trying to encourage people to do the right thing. Why not highlight the good practice, create openly available tools that emphasize how to do something well? Momentum will continue if we're showing people the right way to do things and make it as available in as many languages as possible. And as you saw earlier from Neil's presentation, Think, Check, Submit, I think, is a fantastic example of that. It's a cross-sector initiative that aims to educate researchers and promote integrity and build trust. The journals checklist, I think, is available in something like 47 languages, and the books checklist is available in slightly fewer, maybe 21, 22, but it's a wonderful initiative, not just about open access, but about creating good practice across the whole of scholarly publishing. So to conclude, we are tired and we are wary, and we want to hunker down and protect what we have, but I urge you to do the opposite. If you can find that last grain of energy to keep pushing open access forward, then advocate for greater transparency and greater openness, because I believe that they're the antidote to misinformation and distrust. Reach out to your colleagues, to your peers in your network, nurture your community, think globally, and let's start building those bridges. Thank you very much.
Dominic, huge thanks for that. And you said you hoped people would be inspired by that presentation. I'm sure they have been inspired by both presentations, yours and Neil's. And thank you for coming back, Niels. Annika, I can't see any questions yet, but I don't always manage to see them. Are there any questions?
No, there aren't any questions at the moment.
Would you please, audience, send us some questions? But in the meantime, I do have some questions for you. You've both talked a great deal about trust and integrity and democracy and freedom of speech, how that doesn't always chime with sensationalism and what people want to pay for. And I remember an American librarian once said to me, and this was pre-Trump, that liberal-leaning people are as likely to censor things as right-wing-leaning people, because if those things don't chime with their own heuristics. So can I ask you if either the DOAJ or the DOAB ever censors material purely on its content? Is there anything you reject because of the content itself? I don't mind who starts.
I've got my microphone open. Let me start, if I may, Liz. We have a team of managing editors at DOAJ who are responsible for doing investigations into journals that are highlighted to us by the community that may be questionable. And I know in at least once in 13 years at DOAJ, we have removed a journal from DOAJ because of the content in its articles. Now, that was unusual for us because we are not equipped to investigate articles, individual articles in a journal. We don't have the skills. We index journals from all cultures, all subject matters. We don't have enough people who are qualified to look at that content. And it was purely by chance. It was a journal written in a language that wasn't English, and we happened to have somebody on the managing editing team who understood that language. And they said, I think that the content in this journal might be fanatical. I think we probably need to look at it. And that's when we did remove a journal based on the content that it was publishing. But that was the only time.
Thank you. And then Niels, you're still on mute, Newhan.
Yeah, I can't recall any examples, at least from the 4 years I've been director. But it's in our contracts, our publisher contracts, that if there are defamatory information in books, we do have the possibility of taking down books, but it's never been an issue. But of course, there are situations where we get emails from readers or librarians who find books that they think are questionable, and then we have a process for dealing with that, and which includes the publisher, of course. So this happens not often, but it does happen, and I think generally speaking that we get get along well, and we can do checks, and we can ask for more information regarding the peer review and so on. So we take that very seriously, and we invite anyone in the community to reach out to us if they do find books that are being uploaded to DOAB where there might be an issue. So also just as a background, for DOAB we have a good strong evaluation process, but once the publisher has been approved, they upload the books themselves, right? So we don't check each book coming in, and that's why it's really important that we do occasional checks, but checking each and every book, we can't do that. We are too small a team to do that. So that's why transparency is really important, and we have a mechanism called PRISM, Peer Review Information Service for Monographs, whereby publishers can provide information about the type of peer review they have performed. So not the peer review itself, but the type of the peer review they have performed. And this information is provided in a standardized way through the metadata of the book, so everyone can see the process that it has undergone. I think this is how we try to promote trust and build that trust and transparency to a large extent, but also by inviting the community to always contact us if they think they find something that is not right. It could also be by mistake, right? So so whereas for OAPEN, we see all the books basically going through the system. For DOAB, it's the publisher uploading. But I luckily I don't have any examples. I do have an example which is a different one, where we got I think from the US a few years ago, a book that local government in a state in US wanted to be banned, to be taken off the shelves because of its content, which of course was not because it was really harming anyone, I think. But so we had a conversation with the publisher about it, and we didn't move it away. And actually, I think it's a quite interesting conversation these days about book banning. And actually, I think we've seen with the recent, the current administration in the US that those kind of book bannings are increasing. And again, this is really an argument for more open access books, because of course you can't remove books that are open access. Once they're out there, they're really out there. And I think that is a way to prevent such policies that want to ban books, which we don't support, of course.
Thank you. So the first question from the audience is, do you think there are differences in the challenges for books and journals in terms of keeping the momentum going? And I'll start with you, Dominic, since Niels has just been speaking. Thank you.
So I can only answer from a journal's point of view. I think that and I'm reminded actually, Linda, of a conversation that you and I had after a piece of work that Goldleaf did for us, and there was a comment there that perhaps the format of a journal is on the way out. We're very much in this article-based economy, particularly with massive aggregators of metadata like OpenAlex. Does the journal still sort of have any relevance as a medium I don't know if I can answer that because I still collect vinyl records, so I'm definitely a bit more of a traditionalist, and I hate this sort of individual song economy that we have for digital music. But I mean, I certainly have not seen any hindrance in the momentum of journals. We are receiving so many journals from new and upcoming um, uh, uh, what's the word, countries where the government has chosen to invest and turn that country into a center of research excellence. The most recent and very noticeably being in Indonesia, which is now the country in DOAJ that has, I think, almost the most journals. And we're now starting to see a huge upswing in traffic from the Philippines. And apparently the Philippine government has said a couple of years ago that everyone has to use open access and they have to publish open access. So I think it really depends on where we are in the world, and there are new markets developing all the time.
Just to mention that I have had inquiries about this webinar from both those countries. I mean, I do know librarians in both countries, but of course they won't be here now. They'll watch the recording. But so hello to them and thank you, Niels. Do you think? I mean, I'm sure one of the things you're going to say, Niels, is that books are much more expensive to produce, but don't let me put words into your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. It's a different publishing process. It's a longer process. Normally, you have much longer manuscripts, and it's very different in that way. But I see that I can see, over the past 5 years, perhaps, we've seen a rapid acceleration of and experimentation in finding different business models for publishing open access books, which I think is very stimulating, because this is when we did the OAPEN project many years ago now. We also tried, but it was very difficult because there was so little happening. Now there's much more happening, and we see also increasingly policies both from funders and institutions requiring open access also to books. So slowly or increasingly fast, I would say, publishers are figuring out different new forms of making books, finding viable ways of publishing books open access that not only includes book processing charges, but are collective funding models, library membership models, all sorts of different models. So I think it's if institutions and if policymakers want this transition, then it's really the time to support these models, because otherwise it could decrease. But I have seen and we have documented all these different models in the OA Books Toolkit, and it's really I don't know which model will survive, but hopefully many will survive. And we see like initiatives like the Open Book Collective, where publishers sort of come together as a collective, and libraries provide funding either to the whole collective or to individual presses and infrastructures. And so there are all these exciting new models, I think, out there, and which should help also books becoming more open access.
Thank you. The next question actually touches on something I was going to ask you both right at the end, but I will add it to this question now, because I think otherwise we'll keep on sort of skirting around this subject. But the question is, to force change, should funders start mandating Diamond open access publication of articles resulting from their funding? And I would like to link that to, and Niels probably remembers this, a question I asked the three speakers we had at our first open access webinar, which was, is there enough funding in the system? And I mean, Dominic talked about inequalities just now. Is there enough funding in the system? And if so, how can you get it to work for the whole system and not just for part of the system? And that question about Diamond open access, I think, leads you into that probably. Dominic, sorry to land you with that.
Okay, so should funders mandate Diamond open access publishing? Oh, I don't know. That's a hard question. If I'm honest, I don't know. I know from my experience that, of course, there are funders that do mandate Diamond Open Access Publishing. I know here in the EU there is a massive drive to sort of join up Diamond Open Access Publishing. There are some EU projects that DOAJ and OAPEN and are part of. I'm also reminded of the diversity of the publishing models in DOAJ. You know, we have these mammoth publishers, and then we run the whole range all the way down to these tiny single journals that are run by just one or two people. And I think that it's that diversity that really is important for a successful research ecosphere. And I think I'd be slightly alarmed if grant funding was only going to go to Diamond Open Access Publishing. I'm listening to how that sounds as I say that, but I think there have to be players of all types in order for this to work. So I think I'm going to stop there before I say something even worse. But I don't know if that answers. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that did answer the question. Thank you. And Neil?
Yeah, it is a tough one, but I mean, luckily we've just recently done a lot of study into policy making for open access books via an EU-funded project called Palomira, which I was fortunate to be the scientific coordinator of. And we did a lot of research in the European research area. 39 countries we researched and collected evidence upon which we based recommendations. So we have a lot of recommendations that I can, reference to, which is very helpful for the question, I guess. And because in those recommendations we address all the relevant stakeholders, including research funders and also institutions, of course, who do policies. And we really encourage them to also explore funding mechanisms other than the book processing charge, because the book processing charge has been like the default. And but there are many other models as well. And I think for me, the diamond model is to ensure equitable publishing, right? So that there is access for readers, open access for authors as well, and there is the sense of ownership in the whole publishing process. So I think so. I would really encourage everyone who has interest to read those Palomera recommendations, and also institutions, libraries, publishers to dive into them and to look at them, because they're really trying to align across stakeholders to find to support policies that could be efficient, right? By considering what would a certain policy mean for the publishers, or for the libraries, or for the researcher, or for the society, or the infrastructure provider. And out of this project, we have created, together with Science Europe and Coalition S, a policy forum on open access books, where we will talk much more about this. And I think what we will also explore is the diamond model. But as I think Dom is saying, it's one of several models, but it's a very important one. But it will probably be one model alongside others, depending on the context of the country, of the region, of many things. But so I think we will. It's something we're going to explore much more, and I think it's the model in itself is there's a momentum for the model. I've just come back from the final conference of DIAMAS in Brussels this week, and there's clearly a great support at the high level, UNESCO, European Commission, research funders, but also at the practitioners level. So I see this as a very important model, but alongside other models. And DOAB as DOAJ, I mean, are open to all models that comply with our requirements, of course. But I think we are, in a very interesting, fast-changing landscape, also when it comes to different types of open access models, which I think is good.
Thank you. So more or less the same answer from both of you. Thank you. Dominic, I'm not quite sure I understand this question, but I think I do. If you propose that the spotlight should be taken away from bad practice, do you acknowledge that someone, centralised or not, should still monitor bad acting and there should still be some kind of response or action? I mean, I think that's asking you to be a policeman, and I'm sure you would say, anyway, however you interpret that.
So do we need someone to monitor the bad actors? I'm thinking of Retraction Watch, which I think does an amazing job. I think that they're an extremely useful resource. They are very much a monitor. I think that there are certain resources that aren't so useful, that are very subjective. I think what I think I would like to see less time and resource focused on all of the bad things that people are doing, and much more time and energy focused on good practice and helping people understand how to do something, how to publish their paper correctly, how to find a good journal to publish in. I think that there is a role for a monitor. So yes, to answer the question, I think that there is a role for a monitor, but I think that there's probably there's too much of an emphasis on all of this sort of bad stuff going on, and I think it detracts from the really important message about what open access does, what it can achieve, and how important it is. And I think it's certainly affected some of this momentum. I think all of the perils of open access publishing. I mean, these have certainly contributed to this lack of momentum and this lack of interest, I think. And I think it's slightly ill-placed. I acknowledge that these problems exist. They absolutely do. But I think that there needs to be a slight shift in our focus.
Thank you very much. And Niels, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I fully agree with Dominic. I think we've for example in the OA Books Toolkit we have published a number of author success stories actually. So authors telling about how they the process around publishing a book open access and how it went and how they found it and all that. I think these are stories that should be shared, among in the community, but also with scholars, because I think it's so vital. I think sometimes we probably, when we are working in DOAJ and DOAB, we maybe sometimes live in a bubble, right? And we really need to communicate outside of those bubbles to people, to make them understand what this is about. And we cannot assume that they know, right? So if they get always messages around predatory publishing and questionable publishing, it kind of at some point they think, well, predatory publishing is open access, right? So you get these myths, and we've tried hard to bust these myths. I think the Open Access Books Network had, well, I know that there was a series of myth busting at some point, just to try to tell show it in a very clear way that the positive side of what we do. And it's that it's been a long, I mean, all the time I've been engaged in this, it's always been had to sort of convince people a little bit more that we are sustainable, that we are reliable, that we are, that there's trust in open infrastructures and in open book publishing, which is I mean, I've also been on the library side of things, and I've been negotiating publisher contracts with the very big publishers and all the rest, and I don't think we always ask those questions, right, that you sometimes ask to open initiatives. So I think we should, I clearly focus on the good side, but not hide the challenges, of course, as I think Dom really put very nicely forward. I mean, we face those challenges as well. They are financial. They are, we are. It's a struggle every day to keep things going, and and to find that funding to make things work. And it's important because we see, and especially DOAJ has been around for over 20 years. It's so embedded in so many workflows in libraries and elsewhere, and if you suddenly removed it, it would really make a lot of damage. So it's so crucial that we understand that these open infrastructures are vital, reliable, and worthwhile funding. And I think that requires that we focus on how important they are, and how reliable. As I mentioned, this newsletter from this university library in the US, showing that actually open access is about taking back control and ensuring perpetual access and all the rest of it. So those stories, I think, are really important, and to help bring those forward.
Thank you. And if I can just add to that, your successes in Asia are really quite important, because I've been in meetings in Asia just a few years ago where Asian librarians were dead against open access because they just associated it with rogue companies all the time. You couldn't get consensus about it from anybody. Nobody would support it at all. So Dominic, they always seem to ask for you by name. You mentioned that you've seen a trend of academic institutions shifting their funding from licensed resources to open infrastructure. And I think this is from an American, he or she said. I might have gotten that wrong, so please correct it. We are doing this at our large research library, but we sometimes feel as if we're alone in this effort. Can you point me to sources that show this trend? We would love to identify with other institutions aligned with our effort to collaborate. There must be a list of those somewhere, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the DOAJ website, we have our supporters listed, and we have a whole list of all the different libraries from across the world. We have amazing support from American consortia, from library consortia, for which we're extremely thankful for. So that's available on our website, I think, under the supporters button at the top, doaj.org. I know also that IOI, Invest in Open Infrastructure, their website, they've done loads of research about about how libraries are choosing to invest in open infrastructure. And so there's certainly some resources there. Those are the only two that I can think of at the moment. Niels, do you know of any others?
So two others maybe. I mean, for us, SCOS was really important. I think you mentioned SCOS as well in your presentation. And DOAB and OAPEN were selected jointly for the SCOS campaign in 2019, and this really kicked off our the support we get from libraries. So we have fewer than DOAJ. They're always ahead of us, but we're very appreciative of the support we get from libraries, and just like Dom, I would really like to thank those if on the call that support us. This is extremely important to keep going. So SCOS is I think an important initiative that also supports more widely open infrastructures. And then there's a very new initiative that has just been launched, which is called SOSI. So it's TSOSI.org, which is trying to bring transparency to those institutions who are actually, supporting open infrastructures. So it's also, as we discussed before, changing the focus from those who don't to those who do, right? And really bring those forward. And there you can see a few initiatives. DOAJ is one, DOAB and OAPEN another one, and there are a few others there too. And but like DOAJ, we also on the oapen.org website, you can find the list of libraries supporting us, including the consortia that support us. So there's definitely resources around to show and promote amongst peers, and I think this is something I think has also been raised within groups like ICOLC and other library fora like LIBA and IFLA and so on.
Thank you. And if you don't mind staying, Niels, staying for the next question, because Dominic's already talked about this, I'm going to ask you this question. But Dominic talked about academic requirements and publish or perish. And this question says many researchers are limited to where they publish due to institutional requirements and preferences, e.g. in pursuit of rankings. What do you think can be done to encourage institutions to pursue open access? So would you like to start with that one, Niels?
Yes. So I think again, actually, I would highlight the recommendations coming out of the Palomera project, because these recommendations also are geared towards institutions, and some of the things that we recommend is also looking into the rewards and recognition for book publishing, which of course is very important. It's different for book publishing because there's no impact factor, but there are long standing cultural traditions about perceived prestige publishing and so on, and I think it's important to, it's difficult to to give like this is the answer to everything. I think it's each little discipline has its own publishing culture. In small language areas like Danish is a very small language area, and we have disciplines that are very niche but are very important to the scholarly community. You nurture the publishing community, and that can include all types of very small publishers. We see that widely in many European countries, in Germany, in France, and Italy, where there are very strong communities around specific disciplines, and good small publishers. Some are for profit, some are not for profit, some are institutional. But normally in small academic book publishing, it's not very profitable anyway. But it's I think it's important that institutions acknowledge that bibliodiversity and really support that bibliodiversity, and also that funders do. And then we can provide a lot of supporting tools and services, so infrastructures like OEPN and DOAB, but also other infrastructures like the Open Book Collective, like the Tote Open Metadata, like PKP providing Open Monograph Press. There are many different tools out there that can support both institutional publishing and small for-profit, medium-sized publishers. So I think institutions can be helpful, raising awareness, collaborating with other stakeholders to promote the tools, and with national policymakers, with research funders, enable open access book publishing in a variety of ways that, at the end of the day, is about ensuring that authors, researchers who've put a lot of time and effort into their research, then there's a lot of time and effort putting into the editorial process of creating, coming from a manuscript to a book, to make sure that this is being read and distributed widely. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it's about. But there are many ways in which institutions can support that whole process, I think.
Thank you. And Dominic, when you said publish or perish, do you think that people are going to ever be moved away from that model?
I would hope so. And so I have two thoughts. The first is, for our European colleagues, there is of course, COARA, which is about changing the way that research assessment is done. And I would encourage anyone to sort of join a working group, a COARA working group, or one of their national chapters. I just quickly checked the website, and they only have national chapters in EU countries, which makes sense. As far as I know, it's coara.eu. I don't know if there's an equivalent in the United States. And the other thing that I was reminded of is the research that's been done that has shown that the uptake of open access materials is affected by the age of faculty. So there's a very clear correlation between sort of the more traditional, perhaps senior, high-ranking academics, not all of them, but their preference for the more traditional sort of perhaps closed access materials. I don't know how people make that change apart from just talking. Librarians need to talk to faculty, the senior members, if possible. I've also heard that it's impossible for collections librarians to get in front of senior faculty to talk about open access because they're not interested. But I think it's about opening up and having these discussions about why open access is important.
Thank you. So, and the next question's on AI. I knew we'd get a question on AI sooner or later. How can open access resources be protected against the increasing number of AI bots scraping them for content, which is restricting access for genuine users? Could this be a serious obstacle to keeping the momentum of open access moving forward? I don't mind who starts with that. All right, and I'm going to...
Okay,
Thank you.
I will try. I think it's going to increase the usage of open access materials, but whether that usage then turns into quality output, I think, is yet to be seen. And as I showed in one of my slides, I think it's certainly opening up new pathways into finding open access content. At DOAJ, we only deal in metadata, and we've waived the rights on that. We don't own any of the content, but I know that there are serious issues around copyright and AI. And I don't know, Niels, if that's something that's...
Yeah, I agree. I mean, in principle, I think AI is really good, right? It's a potential different. It's another way of disseminating content. It's a very powerful way, of course, of disseminating content. However, there are all sorts of issues related to that. For example, acknowledging the licenses that are attached to the books that we host. So as you saw from my slides, there is a mixture of CC licenses. There are some CC BY licenses, like a third, but then the rest have other types. And I don't think very many chatbots respect those licenses. So I think there's already a problem there. And even there's a long discussion around fair use, of course, but is it legal to train on CC licensed content and so on? So there's a whole discussion around that. But there are initiatives, and there is a national initiative in the Netherlands currently called GPT-NL, which is trying to do the right thing and actually ask for permission before they start training on material. So there is this way forward, or there is the other way where you just bombard, scrape the internet often in very silly ways. And I'm just putting a link to our blog post in here where our CTO Ronald Schneider has written a blog post about this issue, because it's really becoming a problem that we see, big kind of attacks on our collection from chatbots. So that's causing sometimes 10,000 requests per second. And you can imagine, I mean, even at CERN, that is, an issue sometimes, right? So we have to find ways to manage that. And this is because there are so many chatbots being released that not necessarily are programmed in the most efficient way. And I think that's probably something that that should be addressed, at some level. And I hope there will be found some solutions, because it's a bit like Wild West in the way that it works quite right now, I would say.
Thank you very much. But this is going to have to be our last question, and for the first time we aren't going to be able to field all the questions. So what I'm going to suggest is that after this one, Annika captures the questions that are left, and if you don't mind answering them by email, we'll attach your replies to the slides when they're made publicly available, if that's okay. Thank you. This is a question I was going to ask you, actually. With journals and publishers facing growing political pressure or censorship, is it possible to be politically neutral for organisations like DOAB and DOAJ? And you have told us that you got involved with some American initiatives, for example. And it's almost impossible not to get politically involved in America at the moment.
Maybe I should go first this time to give Dom a little bit of time to think. I don't know if I have a perfect answer to that, but I think as the way I normally think about it is that as infrastructures, so OAPEN and DOAB as infrastructures, we are neutral in the sense that we work with publishers who fulfill our requirements based on our evaluation, right? So we are business model agnostic in that sense. We work with any publisher, very small publishers, very large publishers, anything in between. But we also advocates, and we engage in the community, like in presentations like this one, or we write articles and so on. So we have opinions, and of course that includes who we want to partner with. So we are very selective about who we partner with for projects, but of course also would be very selective about who we would receive support from. But luckily, the libraries supporting us are libraries that still, independent of the political current situation, still support diversity, equity, inclusion, and so really are aligning with our values, which you can, by the way, read in our strategic plan, where we also commit to UNESCO open science recommendations, to sustainable development goals, and so on. So we are quite clear about what we believe in. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dominic, just a quick reply, if you could.
Yeah, I think it's really, really hard, and particularly because we're seeing more and more sort of acts of aggression, more and more things that happen around the world. But like OAPEN and DOB, we're an open infrastructure. We're neutral. We embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Huge thanks to both of you. You have been spectacular. I mean, we knew we had two stellar speakers, but you've even surpassed our expectations, and clearly those of the audience as well. I mean, of the people who joined originally, nearly everybody is still there, and I'm sure the ones who had to go just had to go. So huge thanks for that. And I know that many, many more people will watch the recording, and both the ones who have registered for this and the ones who pick it up on YouTube later. So huge thanks, and we hope that all your initiatives will be successful. And I do recommend to everybody that you read the article in the Scholarly Kitchen from yesterday and the day before, which is very interesting indeed.